Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah. I'm a community manager for SOC Prime, and we're gonna start our Discord stage today to celebrate a little bit of Halloween. Um, uh, with me today here is Jeff from SOC Prime team. Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
Sure. My name is Jeff. I work at SOC Prime along with Hannah as well. So excited to be here. So thank you very much, Hannah, for allowing me to participate in this.
Great. Thank you. It's gonna be our first stage at the server, so we're gonna test a bit and play a bit with the function, and I'm gonna give you heads up what we're gonna do today. We're gonna basically celebrate a little bit of Halloween, and we're gonna do it in cybersecurity style. We're gonna talk about scary stories. Some are really scary, some are um, laughably scary, some are just general topics on what it's like to work in cybersecurity and the particular relationship. I think our sphere has two topics of fear and fear mongering and everything related. We also gonna have a live giveaway, and I'm gonna start it right now, so all of our audience can participate in this giveaway. As you can see on the left, there is live giveaway section, and I'm starting it just now. You should see it in the chat. Um, uh, if you click to participate, at the end of this event, we will select randomly 3 winners who are going to get 1 month subscription for Uncoder AI, a SOC Prime product, and also try Hack Me subscription for 1 month. And this going to be a very cool tool for those who want to learn more about cybersecurity, improve their skills, and in general, try Hack Me. Really cool place to become better at being not hacked. um, please don't be shy to click to participate. And also, don't be shy when you're going to listen to the stories that I'm going to present today to maybe drop your story in the chat. Your story might get selected at the end of the podcast and also get a prize. I'm mentioning it because um, when we were preparing this event, and I was talking with SOC Prime team about it and trying to get stories from them, from their experience, what was worrisome for them, what they found scary in their past careers. I found a lot of people actually were really puzzled at first. They were like, no, I don't know. Do you have an example? How can I tell my story? And perhaps not every person is a storyteller, but what I find interesting is when you start telling stories, people start to remember, oh, it's actually something similar happened to me. So during this broadcast, if you're going to remember something like that, please drop it in the chat. Doesn't have to be long, but it would be cool to see and learn from each other. So so Jeff, what was the most scary story you had in working with SOC Prime or not with SOC Prime? Maybe we cannot say if it was happening with SOC Prime.
What's the scariest thing? I think in some ways when I joined the company, the context to which the dynamics of the war, in particular to with what Ukraine was going through. I think that was one where the viability of the company, or just the concerns around, like, the dynamics and the cult and the people involved. And but the great thing about this was, despite all that, learning about people and just how vigilant people are, or just and understanding uh, their concerns and their willingness to just survive and thrive. I think that's been extremely helpful for me. So in some ways, actually, in a lot of ways, I'm very proud to be um, working here alongside Hannah at this company. So that's an amazing thing. So it's scary and still is, and with regards to stuff that's happening right now in other parts of the world, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't want it to go to this topic right away. I don't know. But yeah, for those who don't know, the SOC Prime was founded by Ukrainians, and big chunk of our team are Ukrainian. So, of course, everything that has been happening since the start of the war affected us in a very major way. But I think um, it's not how to say. I think it's a very like scary experience, but not the one that is particularly relatable. And as a Ukrainian myself, I don't want it to be relatable, and I don't want any other person from any other part of the world really have to go through it. So um, and there is a lot of it's an experience that I guess is so extreme that you don't want to really prepare for it, you know. And there's many things that are scary, I think, in life when you work in cybersecurity, that you have to be prepared for. You have to know, and the more you know, the better prepared you are. So that's why I think, well, it's definitely a challenge to operate as a cybersecurity or just any type of company when your country is in full-fledged war. um, I think there is other challenges that like everyone can sort of learn from, and um, also grow if they get them. Um, yeah, so for those who are joining, don't forget to join the giveaway for participation. And I think I want to share the first story, because this is actually when I talked with SOC primers, a lot of people who have past experience in SOC, who are currently working, they jokingly mention it quite a lot. And I have one example of that story. And I wonder if our audience can, like, as I read it, they can get to the bottom of it and tell me what is happening inside and what is the reason of this scary story. But yeah, I'm gonna start. So uh, we connected a new data stream to the CM. In particular, we connected threat intelligence feed, IP addresses, and URLs that have already been reported in other organizations. We set up alerts for when these compromise indicators appear in other logs. And it didn't take long to see that there was an infection. Someone was actively communicating with the whole set of servers. Alarm, investigation, looking for the source. It turns out that the source of the request is one of the CM servers. And this is even worse. Has the CM been breached? Has it been hacked long ago? And is it leaking information out? After a short investigation, we found out, or rather, we knew about this functionality, but we didn't think about this effect. The CM was enriching the data. Each name extracted from the URL was automatically resolved into an IP address. Technically, the CM connector performed DNS queries, but we also collected and analyzed DNS queries. And when the information from threat intelligence feed was processed by this module, DNS queries were generated for each malicious URL that came through threat intelligence feed, which was saved in the DNS log. And the information from this log was compared with the same threat intelligence feed to generate the alert. So, as you can see, ultimately, it was a situation of a loop, and where inside of your investigation, you go you to the bottom of it and discover that you are the threat. And what is interesting that I heard from several members that this was quite common anecdote, that you don't want to find out, you don't want to discover, but it happens. Um, does any of our audience familiar with this type of stories? Have you discovered that you were the threat? Let me know. Jeff, do you find yourself being a threat sometimes?
Do I feel myself as a threat? Not really, because I feel like, I mean, okay, so as somebody who's not necessarily a security or a SOC practitioner, but works mostly on the business side, one of the concerns that I always have is, and maybe, for the audience who can kind of relate, or maybe not, is as a user, I don't necessarily have a compliance mentality or just some guidelines to tell me these are the things that we ought to be doing or these are the things we shouldn't be doing. And as a result, sometimes as you continue to log in or you save your passwords in a certain way, um, it's antiquated, right? The way that you used to do things, or the way I do things, are somewhat antiquated. Like my wife, I'll give you an example. So she'll physically write down passwords, which is something
Oh
we
no.
laugh at. We laugh at, but like then how much more are my ways antiquated to the ever progressing processes of just learning security, and that dynamic, that change, the further I don't continually evolve and adapt, I feel like then potentially I could be a threat, right? So Hannah, to answer your question on that,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
right, so it's always trying
I
to learn something, right?
Yeah, I think it's very relevant because in a lot of stories, a lot of these mistakes, or dangerous situation, the key factor in them is very human. It's a human mistake. It's a human negligence, a willful, or just from not enough scope. And like, it's not a secret that cybersecurity is severely understaffed. That means a lot of pressure on like a small team. And um, the biggest issue sometimes that we are not as perfect as we want our systems to be, and as humans we fail. And when setting up systems like this, and when um, even if there is like compliance training within companies, it's quite often you get this like I also had conversations with the team, and they're telling me that real scary stories happen when you start hearing from your team members, or um, like things like, oh, I'm like, in my role I'm not doing anything to be attacked, or well, or I won't make a normal password. It's hard to remember, like, my password is secure enough. And this kind of subjectivity, or like, yeah, it's enough, we have like a antivirus installed, that's totally fine. I guess. And like, this mindset that can be sometimes potentially hidden behind just people not speaking about their um, security literacy is was I feel like really scary for people who work in SOC. It's like, I can compare it to probably you know a teacher who is giving a lecture in the school, and they are preparing all the material. They go through the slides, they present it for the students, and at the end of the lecture, they ask, "Okay, do you have any questions? Is everything's clear?" And you don't get any questions, and then you do an exam, and you do a training, and then you don't actually you realize that no one was actually paying attention, and that's scary. So yeah, and there is another story that has to do with also um, human factor. As always, I guess I find it very common theme, and it's called lateral movement through insistence and over responsibility. So um, there is an investigation underway into malware getting into the organization's network. It was about trying to communicate with an already rotten, unused infrastructure, a malicious server already known through threat intelligence feed. There were several attempts in batches of 3 or 4 in a row, with an interval of 10 minutes and half an hour. It looks like a beginning of a massive attack. The only problem is that all DNS queries of the organizations are initiated from the same point. Example, we can see the malicious DNS queries, but we can't see who did it, which was an architectural gap that we knew about but hadn't solved yet. Based on the nature of the request, we found out the type of malware and approximate variants of emails that could have been used for delivery. So we went to the mail server logs and began searching among the emails delivered from the outside. And as you can imagine, there were many in this organization. We found out a similar email and one user to whom it was delivered. We went to the user's workstation to check it out. The machine was running an antivirus, and it successfully blocked the attempts to open the email. Everything is fine. But why so many requests? Why there are intervals? And why do we see further activity, but no one else has received this email? After talking to the user, we found out. So the user, an accountant, received an email with an invoice and tried to open it. But it didn't work, of course, because the antivirus killed it. They tried again. It didn't work for the same reasons. And after 3, 4 attempts, they forwarded the email to an internal group of accountants asking for help opening it because they couldn't. Others also tried several times with the same result. And only one of them had an antivirus that hadn't been updated in time and allowed the malware to start. However, this user did not receive the infected email from the outside. So the attackers did not get to him from the very beginning. So I think it's a prime example of the human factor. And the reason why the story is called lateral movement is because lateral movement is a tactic in MITRE, but in this particular case, there was no actual lateral movement. It was just a team trying to work out, why we cannot open this in spreading the malware.
So I have
How do you like?
just an observation on that. Just as I'm hearing
Yes.
this story, it's like knowing this as an accountant, like the user has an expectation to make sure like bills are paid and invoices are taken care of. So on that perspective, I can empathize with this person because it's like, okay, I need to take care of some core function in that accounting person's role to make sure that gets paid or at least reviewed. So once you take the invoice, you look at it with regards to, I'll make this up, like a purchase order or attached to a separate type of approval from the initial requester to say, yes, please pay. So once you get the purchase order agreement, the invoice, and the approval to pay, you can kind of move it forward. But you need all three. And so as a result, this accountant's probably looking at this invoice saying, this is one evidence or document that I need, and I need to do whatever it takes to open this document. And so whoever decided to initiate this on the outside to the accountant deliberately did this knowing that as an accountant, that's kind of the things that they would want to do is open up an invoice. So they tried very hard. So it's it's I see
So
this as it's well played
it's scary
in
for
some
you,
ways.
right?
Yes, it's absolutely scary
Well,
because
I
you're
mean,
going to receive a lot of external emails with regards to invoices, right? And not necessarily an accountant would have like all the engagement interactions with all the vendors, right? So
mhm.
I'll make this up. Let's say I do accounts payable. So, and then I get like 200 vendors reaching out saying, hey, this is an invoice that gets paid. So we're going to naturally open up attachments or an email that says, okay, let's take a look at the invoice because we have to review it, right? It is
Mhm.
scary. So Hannah is just an amazing story.
Well, yeah, I really like the story as well. But I think to answering your worry and your fear, this is why basically a lot of SOCs set up systems where if you're unsure, if you're like, if even if you're sure, you should forward this email and check it with them. And this is like speaks to this kind of hidden um, v- value and importance of security teams within the company. You would think as an accountant, you don't really, aside from initial setup, some trainings, you don't have a lot in common. And why would you interact with them on daily basis? But actually, especially if it's a new client, or especially if it's an old client that you might, just became very comfortable opening attachments from and everything. Uh, I think, and especially because we are working as in cybersecurity in our case. So I think this highlights really important area where cross company communication and especially role of SOC is really hidden but should be brought to light through these conversations, I think.
One of the things I'll add something for context, Hannah, on this one, but one of the things that I've been hearing a lot of, at least over the last year and a half, was um, threats that are emerging or that are being vulnerable are specifically going after supply chain. So you can't
Yeah.
necessarily go after the large enterprise companies, but you can potentially go after their vendors or their um, supply chain and essentially try to get through them to get to others. So um, at least from an investor community, when we were dealing with just kind of the next phases of like where threats and vulnerabilities were, um, what I've been hearing a lot is supply chain was kind of a focus area to just enhance and just improve upon security.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's particularly vulnerable area that and honestly the story can be included, I think, in some security trainings as a cautionary tale. I have an interesting question to the audience, to those who are joining us today, um, because I think it's a bit of a cultural thing, but I'm still gonna ask this question. Um, do Have you ever encountered like superstitions within SOC, within your teams, people being superstitious towards anything like perhaps being wary of night shifts on Friday 13th, or I don't know, using particular numbers within passwords or something. Um, because I found some very interesting story that has to do with it, and superstitions like black cats and scary numbers and everything is quite a thing for Halloween, but I think a bit in major way opposite of what is mentality of SOC. Um, and by the way, everyone who is joining, don't forget to join the giveaway that is happening in live giveaway chat. You just need to click on the. Jeff, do you have any superstitions in accounting?
I have a lot of superstitions personally. I don't know if I necessarily have that with work. I can't think of anything that I would think about particular with superstitions at work. No, I mean just generally like I'll give you an example. Writing with a certain color of pen, that potentially is a superstition, but again, that's just outdates
Yeah,
me
it's
because
cultural.
everything. It's a cultural thing. That's might be one, but I don't really try to put superstitions influencing the workplace. So sorry, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah. I
know.
mean,
You know?
I don't think anyone does. Like, you don't really rely on them, but it's interesting to find and observe them a bit, um, because I mean, superstitions are interesting thing because as far as I studied it, they are part of this thinking. In psychology, it's called magical thinking, and it comes from our like um, early early days of humanity when there was not a lot of ratio happening in our um, the way we would perceive the world. So, but we would still try to explain the world. So, and we would still want to control it. So we would come up with this kind of small rules, small things that help us. But it's interesting that somehow they still sometimes bleed into our daily lives already in 20th century. Um, I personally oftentimes feel really scared when I don't know, I'm sending a big newsletter that can hit, I don't know, 15,000 people or more, or I'm pinging the server. There is like such a big pressure in those moments that I honestly sometimes like want to do some kind of ritual just to calm myself. And in reality, I know it doesn't really affect the results, but um, what what is interesting is that in certain cases um, there are actual correlation between superstitions and cybersecurity. For example, there is a famous Friday 13 virus. It's pretty old one, and it's called the Jerusalem virus. It's one of the oldest computer viruses, dating back to 1987, and it affected files in the MS-DOS operating system. And at the time, they were kind of standard. And after DOS operating system were succeeded by newer types of operating system, the Jerusalem virus became kind of obsolete. Um, and it's called Jerusalem virus, or because there are rumors that it's originated in Israel, but kind of unconfirmed. And the reason it's Friday 13th because the virus was known to erase various program on set days, and most commonly on Friday 13th of any month. Um, and the virus also infected executable programs repeatedly until they became too large to run on the computer. And in general, it is like it is speculated that the creator of the virus but was religious or superstitious, because again, it would only trigger and run on Friday 13th. Or perhaps like behind this, there was an intent to scare someone. Perhaps it was designed with the intent to attack certain organization and combine like unwanted behavior of the system and some kind of real life threats, and you know just people being physically threatened, which is actually quite not quite common, but a existing behavior that I hear happening with certain organizations that become victims of ransomware attacks, where uh, a situation happens that organizations are not only threatened with deletion of their files, or the attack being released and made public to the client base, but also the receptionist being called by the attackers and physically threatened, and so it's um, becomes a whole thing.
So while you were talking about that, I was looking up how frequently Friday the 13th happens, given what you just mentioned with the Jerusalem virus, and it says Friday the 13th happens on average, every 212 days per year, or 212 days. So it could potentially happen 1.7 times per year. And in this year, it happened in January 13th and October 13th, just not too long ago, but twice this year. So interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's actually a thing that can be interesting. I wonder if our audience knows of any other examples of I don't know, some kind of religious or cultural things being used in attacks. Because again, one of the most vulnerable things in many systems are humans, and humans are vulnerable in face of their fears, sometimes irrational. Um, oh, we actually have an interesting story from Bezuda. Um, okay, let's check it out. Bezuda, I will try to read it from the first try. Um, and Bezuda is actually Ukrainian, if I'm not mistaken. A few years ago, here was a very funny problem that I was able to abuse. I used to look for Linux-based servers in Shodan with open VNS, 5,900 plus ports. And I found a lot of servers. One of them was with a CPU AMD e, uh, APYC. I'm not sure how to pronounce this part. 7703 or something, which costs 200k hryvnias, which is Ukrainian currency at that time, and another one which was hosted by Vietnam University. Well, lookup showed it with their email and another contact information. When you have opened VNS, you're able to restart the server, etc. They had unsecured bootloader where you can choose what system you want to load. Because of that, you were able to change the way how you load the system. I was able to create account with root and hide it in the system, but it was just for fun. I never used to destroy their system, etc. Server on AMD was Monero mining, and I looked for information in setting a file where I got his email. So I made an email account named "It's Me and I'm sorry." Okay. I used to message to every email address um, that was found, just to let owners know about the problems what they that they had. I showed the proofs and that I was in the system, and I was happy to see in next few days that I was not able to connect to the servers. Um, well, it's a very very particular story, but I'm glad you let them know and help them to improve their systems after all, because could have ended very bad for them, I guess, in long term. It's an interesting story, Bizuda. Thank you. Um, yeah, and there is one last topic that I would like to touch on before we end today's event. It would be actual also topic of fear, and topic of fear of in cybersecurity, and that this is a thing that is quite interesting, and quite researched. Um, and it's not just a topic just only for cybersecurity. It's a topic for all of the security. Um, it's called fear appeal. And fear appeal is basically a mechanism in which you can communicate a threat, and the perceived threat and the value of it increases the attention, increases the rate on which uh, potentially those who can protect and defend from that threat can act. In particular, you can any cybersecurity training is a threat appeal. Also, a bit of a lot of communication from, for example, from SOC Prime team or from many, I would argue every company in this industry is threat appeal. We want to communicate that, okay, it's very dangerous out there, and at the same time, we want people to act on the danger. But I think what is very interesting is that this topic is getting researched on potential downsides. And as people who work in SOC, I think it's interesting to um, look at this topic from the point where you are actually communicating these threats to your team. You're trying to make sure they're using a secure password. You're trying to make sure that they are not opening phishing emails. And you have to scare them enough for them to remember it. But what are the downsides? If you're scaring them too much, if you're being too pushy about it, um, it can actually create resistance. It can actually create um, many other unwanted outcomes. Um, Jeff, have you ever felt anything like that?
No, but it reminds me of The Boy Who Cried Wolf, right? And the story that we're familiar with,
Yeah,
where, it was doing it for fun, and at some point, the frequency of it such is that everyone ignored it. When there was actually, instead of a perceived threat, but a real threat, and he actually called out, unfortunately, the community or
but
right. Go ahead.
yeah, I think the issue here is like every time, um, I would more compare it to a situation where you actually have a wolf alert and you're educating everyone in the village about the wolves, and everyone like first time they hear about the wolves, they think, oh my god, this is a very scary animal, but by the time they hear it for the fifth times, I don't know, they become so um
Desensitized.
desensitized, exactly, um to the idea of the wolf, and they start combating it, saying it's like, why are you scaring us with a wolf? It's just like, I don't know, I have a dog that is bigger than the wolf, or like, I pet a dog, it wasn't scary, how maybe a wolf is not scary too. So I think it's a bit of that. The So I think the topic, and this communication style that a lot of cybersecurity companies, and at the same time SOC practitioners should be aware of, that you should be very practical with the way you give advices and um, instructions to your team, which value you provide to them, and what are you protecting them from, and what their actions should be, like what we talked earlier, about that story where accounting was getting invoice, right? It's really stoked some fear in you, Jeff. um, but the essence of the training should be that you're not actually, I'm not trying to threaten you, I'm not trying to scare you, I'm not trying to make you afraid of any emails that you get, and or doing your job. We're just trying to establish the procedures and new protocols. How can you operate more safely, considering when you know the threat? So yeah, um, that's that's largely it. I wonder if our audiences have interesting questions or feedbacks to share. I think Bazuda is sharing more details about his case that we were sharing later. You guys can check it out in the comments if you're curious. What was his investigation finding out?
Ultimately, it sounds like as he's writing this up, like communication is core to just trust with regards to just equipping, let's say accountants, but at the same time, it's like there's a numerous amount of like constant education and constant equipment that we have to do in order to protect, right? So in some ways, I feel like what's difficult is being up to the latest with regards to just understanding how to protect, um, while at the same time simultaneously trying to continue doing the job, whatever that job may be for yourself, right? Um, and I feel like
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
though there's communication, it's a pervasive like uh, constant learning, which makes it very difficult. So it goes back to your whole point of this threat. After 5 times of learning something new or something like this, it's like, okay, what happened to the previous 4 ones? Are they a little outdated? Do they become, replaced up, and then you kind of lose the significance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and it's also like challenging. I think the fact that um, in fact the procedures and the things that we need to educate people, um, they change, and they're also receiving um, information not just from the SOC. So for example, um, on average, I would say the digital literacy is increasing among general population. But it also may can mean that there is misplaced focus. People would be more worried about getting a QR code than I don't know. For our event, we had a banner with a QR code, and there used to be a giant scare of the QR code. Then they would be worried about setting up a secure password, or again checking the link or attached file sent to you by organizations that you sort of know, that seems familiar, and then there's just one letter different in the email. So yeah.
I think that
All
sometimes
right.
a challenge with like vendors, SOC vendors, right? You know, like when a
Mhm.
customer purchases a security vendor and after a year decides to change it, and it's like this constant, like, what is the sexiest security application now that people are, you know, moving towards? And then they try it and they like it, or they try it and they don't like it, and then move on to the next thing and the next thing. And it's just constant. I don't know. I feel like there's a balance, or a sense of like making sure the company is protected, making sure that we're doing the right things, while not always jumping on the bandwagon to the latest. And at the same time, you know, is this a fear of missing out? Like, do you feel like if I don't apply this particular vendor, which everyone is suggesting, then do I miss out?
Mhm.
Or am I?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah.
mean, there is an expectations, like on one hand, like for just a general user, as I mentioned, they will be like, oh, I have an antivirus. That's enough for my security. But if you're operating a SOC, you might have bought a new CM that was like very hyped. You did some research and everyone seemed liking it, and you expect it to be out of the box already, ready solution, and that's gonna work and protect you, and um, you you don't need to set it up. You just need to wait for the vendor to provide you with all of the latest threats. And I think that's been proven many times that just sometimes vendors can keep up. Um, the bigger they are, the longer are the processes, and sometimes just delivery is not enough for your company, for your SLAs, for your protection. So um, there's, like, to put it simply, unfortunately, there is no easy solutions, and we need to stay vigilant to be safe. All right. I don't see many questions in the chat about our topic. It's interesting topic, Halloween. For I think for many people, Halloween is like a fun holiday, a whimsy, scares, and But for people who work in cybersecurity, in reality, it's actually a lot of real threats, and not a particularly funny topic that they are take so lightly. And the threats are not mythical and are very much real. So um, I still think there are sometimes like these kind of situations where we need to laugh a bit, where we are, finding ourselves into investigations, or you just find people sometimes not ignoring the protocols, but perhaps just trying to do their job and as the best they can, and you need to go extra mile to help them um, be more safe, and explain it one more time. But um Yeah, I think SOCtober, SOC scares are oftentimes become a reality. So we need to stay vigilant. All right, everyone who joined, don't forget that to click to participate in live giveaway channel if you're still with us. Um, and it's gonna end in 5 minutes, and I'm gonna contact you after probably tomorrow morning about all the processes and how you're gonna get your, if you win, Uncoder AI and Try Hack Me subscription. And also, I would like to thank Bezuda for his story. And um, we're gonna give you again one Uncoder AI for a month and Try Hack Me for 1 month too. Thank you for participating in the event. And for those who join us, for those who perhaps will be watching it in the recording, please let us know in the chats, how did you like the event? What would you like to hear in the next one? We hope to make a series. We hope to invite interesting speakers. Today was a practice, a test, a bit of informal activity, and something new for SOC Prime Discord and SOC Prime community. And I wish you very safe and not scary at all Halloween. Thank you, Jeff, for joining me today.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. And to
All
everyone
right.
in the community, enjoy Halloween.
Okay, bye bye.